You want to see it?
Yeah.
You want to see
Yeah.
it? I think they need to spell their names.
Yeah, we will
Okay.
spell names. Spelling names, you can start.
Spelling the name is Mr. Bassi, Ben Bassi, Bassi.
Yes, and Jean-Rene Kwilu is most noted, so Kwilu is Kwilu, and then it can just be Mr. Kwilu. That'll be fine. Mr. Glazer, you had your
Everything on it. Glazer.
Okay. Alright, so thank you guys for coming on this road. Good. Alright, yeah, thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it. So this is a joint press conference here by NBS Legal Consulting and with Martin Glazer Law Office. This is Mr. Ben Bassi and then Mr. Kwilu. We're counsel for the next of kin of Mr. Stephen Afolabi Opaso, was killed by the Winnipeg Police Service December 31st last year, and Mr. Glazer is here representing us next of kin for Mr.
Bradley Singer, who was killed after being shot by the police on February 13th, 2023.
Right. So the reason we convened this press release is that these two deaths raises some concerns for us, and it becomes not an isolated situation. From the get-go, as we have been saying, is that we don't have a particular problem with the police service, because we understand the importance of the police service, but when we pride ourselves to have a culture for safety for all, and then when we have seen that people laboring with mental health situations, unfortunately ending up dead as a result of police conduct, it raises questions for the family, raises questions for Manitobans, and we have to make sure that the police are conducting themselves properly, and we have to make sure even if they are properly equipped to be handling this kind of situations. So the reason why we're here is, first of all, to express the concerns of the family, first and foremost, and second of all, just a greater picture of what we consider to be a crisis, the issue that we're having. I'll pass to Mr. Bassi, who will speak with just to update what's happening, but recently Mr. Glazer and I wrote to the chief medical examiner, because first of all, we are asking for an inquest to be conducted into these two killings, so that light can be shed into the conduct of the police officers that were involved, how these calls were responded to, and what unfortunately end up being a death sentence for unfortunately Mr. Opaso and Mr. Singer. So that is mainly why we're here. So before I pass the mic to Mr. Glazer, I would just like Mr. Bassi say a few words, and then after.
Yeah, what I want to say is that the family has some concern. The first one is the racial profiling, so they are wondering if that was a racist crime. Having a young boy calling the police to check on the mental health of somebody, and they all heard the police came in and said, drop the knife, drop the knife. A few seconds after, bam, bam, bam. So the family has many questions. One of those is, was the 3 shots necessary? So if the first shot, we understood that there were 3 shots, one on the shoulder, one on the leg, and one on the chest. If the first shot was on the leg, Mr. Afolabi probably failed, so it was not a threat for the police. If the first shot was on the arm, he probably fell also and dropped the knife, so the second shot was not necessary. If the first shot was on the chest, he probably fell, so there was no need for a second and a third shot that killed him. So there was no need to have 3 shots on somebody who is sick. So that's the first concern. The second concern is, we understand that when this kind of incident happens, the 2 police officers must be separated. So the concern is, after the shot, how much time elapsed for the supervisor to come and separate these two police officers. So they had the time, as a concern of the family, did they have the time to discuss and to exchange their position? In that case, of course, the inquiry or the investigation could be biased or, not properly followed if they had the time to discuss together before they were separated. Another concern is there were the roommates in the room. So the family wants to know if they witnessed the shot. Were they hidden? Were they in a position to see the police officers? What distance was it? Was the Mr. Opaso going toward the police officer or going back? Mr. Opaso is the one who opened the door with the knives, threatening himself. So is it at some point, the family wants to know if what distance was it? Was it a straight threat for the police officers? So all these questions, the family wants to know that. So the racial profiling, it's a very key question for them. So they want to have some answers for that. And having discussed with some of these roommates, some of them expressed and say this is the investigation is still going on. But what we understood is that they were handcuffed, brought to the police station. Why were they handcuffed? They were not, they were not a threat for the police. So the family wants to know what happened in that car when the police officers were driving them to the station. Were there some questions? What kind of questions were they asked concerning the shots? So all these questions the family would like to know. So I guess I'll pass it to Mr.
Yeah, so that's why we believe those are just, we're not making conclusions. We're not making final conclusions. We're not like saying the investigation is pending. We're careful about those are just the questions, and we believe that it lends credence to the necessity of having an inquest, so that these also questions can be properly answered, right? So that family concerns, Manitobans can say that when we're calling, the help for the police, especially a family member, then I know there's the before I pass to Mr. Glazer, there's the ARC program that the government is somehow proud of deploying, but clearly it's not it's not probably working. So as many the PAC, everything I think will be the experts saying maybe a civilian-led response team will be more appropriate in this kind of thing. I know sometimes they have to deploy police in plain clothes and hidden, but unfortunately it shouldn't be for the police to decide if ARC should be deployed or not. These are professionals, these are experts, they deal with this kind of situations. They are in a better position to assess if it's a situation where they need intervention of law enforcement or not, because the main key issue we keep hearing is, to de-escalate deterrence, and unfortunately we don't know if the police are equipped for that. So that's the issue.
Yeah, I would like to add something that was a very big concern for the family. So they lost their loved one, and they were, as they said, they were abandoned with the body. So they have to incur major cost for the funerals, to have the family travel from Nigeria to Canada when they did nothing, no help, no assistance, no money. So they have to pay for their hotel, they have to pay for the funeral home, they have to pay for everything, including the lawyers. So the family would like to know, in that kind of situation, when the police kill somebody, what does the government do to assist them, at least financially, to bury their loved ones? So that's a major concern that the family wants to know and understand.
And that's a nice segue to
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Glazer. I represent Jerry Singer, who's seated on my right, who will be speaking to you after I finish. His brother, Bradley, was shot to death by Winnipeg Police Service on February 13th, 2024, after they attended at his home under an order for an involuntary medical examination, otherwise known as a Form 2 under the Mental Health Act. Bradley Sr., I'm told, has no history of violence. One can only imagine the fear experienced by this mentally sick man when confronted with police and guns. My information is that on a previous occasion, multiple police vehicles attended to his home, and at least 4 to 6 heavily armed tactical team police officers dressed like soldiers, including carrying firearms and police shields, attended to Mr. Singer's home at 259 Magnus Avenue in Winnipeg, and ended up breaking a window after sending a drone in and subsequently gaining entry. One can only imagine the fear experienced by this mentally sick man when confronted with that kind of intimidating police presence. In my opinion, that would scare the living daylights out of someone without a mental illness. And on this previous occasion, which I understand was around the end of January 2024, likely January 27, 2024, which predated Bradley Singer's fatal shooting on February 13, 2024, this vulnerable, mentally ill man must have been extremely frightened when confronted by a group of heavily armed police officers in what is commonly known as SWAT team gear. Who knows what role that experience with the police tactical team played in his mind on February 13, 2024, when he was shot dead by the police. I've been provided with a videotape of that January 2024 police attendance, which occurred about 2 weeks, I'm told, before he was shot to death. I will now play the videotape for all of you, so you can see for yourselves how what I call a small army of Winnipeg Police Tactical Unit officers descended on Bradley Singer's home. On that occasion, I advised that he was taken to the hospital by the police. And Mr. Kwilu is going to play the video for you, and it should be projected on the screen. Am I right? If all goes well.
Yeah.
Or is this on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you get the volume turned up?
Yes.
If you want, we can play it again. But in my opinion, what we just watched is totally unreasonable. In my opinion, the kind of police response we just saw is out of proportion to what's required to take a middle-aged, mentally ill person to hospital. Whatever you want to call it, as I say to you, this is certainly not de-escalation. Using what is commonly known as a SWAT team is the opposite of de-escalation. It tends to create a terrifying situation for someone like Mr. Singer. That kind of police response may be justified in the case of a dangerous drug dealer, a terrorist, or a hostage taker, but in my respectful view, cannot be justified when dealing with a sick man who needs to be safely and securely seen by a doctor. And we should be outraged by what we just saw. Please keep in mind that the police response you just saw on video happened within 1 month of the same police force shooting Mr. Opaso, whose family is represented by these able lawyers to my left. When they shot Mr. Opaso to death on December 31st, 2023, My question is this: why would the same police force use a tactical team for Mr. Singer in January 2024 after they had already been involved in a fatal shooting only weeks before? One would think the police would soften their approach rather than deploy multiple police officers and police vehicles, as well as the drones you just watched on video. Some of you may have counted the number of police officers who attended, all wearing soldier-like uniforms with shields. The two shooting deaths by the Winnipeg Police in this case bear similarities. Not only do they involve the same police force, but in both cases, the men killed were mentally ill. They were not criminals, they were sick, and they needed help. On March 20th, 2024, I wrote to the Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Nunes, requesting that an inquest be held pursuant to the Fatality Inquiries Act. I have not received a response. In my view, one inquest covering both deaths would be appropriate in this case, having regard to the similar circumstances in both fatalities. I join with my colleagues in calling for such an inquest to answer many questions that remain unanswered, and hopefully make recommendations that would assist in preventing such tragedies from happening in the future. Aside from the debate over whether or not police should respond to calls involving mentally ill people, or whether clinicians or mental health workers should respond, one of the recommendations that I will be seeking is that such encounters be videotaped entirely, either by police wearing body cameras, or by simply holding a cell phone and videotaping the entire process from beginning to end, so that there is an objective electronic record as to what occurred. We don't have a video of what happened to Mr. Singer. I wish we did. Mental illness is not a crime. And yet, why as a society does it seem like we're treating mentally ill people like criminals? The fact that two mentally ill people who needed help ended up being shot to death by the Winnipeg Police is extremely concerning and should be alarming to every one of us. We need to do better, and we need to find alternative ways to help mentally ill people. These cases show that police responding in such cases raise the question as to whether or not the system as it is set up is working. There are alternatives, and these alternatives must be used whenever possible to avoid tragic deaths occurring in cases like the two cases we're talking about today. My client, Jerry Singer, seeking transparency and accountability, and is interested in finding out the complete truth about what happened to his brother, how it happened, why it happened, and why his brother had to die. Now, regardless of whether or not the police shooting was justified or not justified, the fact remains there are gaps in our system, and that people like my client, whose brother was shot to death by police, are victims and need something to be put in place to help such victims. Currently, as you know, victims of crime have all kinds of resources available to them, including victim services, victims of crime compensation, counseling, and people who can help victims navigate the criminal justice process. However, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing in place whatsoever to support people like my client and people like the family members of my colleague's client, of my colleague's whose loved one was killed. So there's nothing in place, as far as I'm aware, to help families of victims of police violence. I'm requesting that the Manitoba government, and I'm joined in that by my colleagues, set up an infrastructure containing support services for families and loved ones of people who end up dead as a result of encounters with police. As the system currently operates, people like my client feel they're ignored by the system and left to deal with their loss on their own without any guidance or support. My client, Jerry Singer, who's here, along with his other brother, Hartley, who's here, raising his hand, they both feel like they've been confronted with a wall of silence. Without anyone to talk to get answers, without knowing how to go about getting answers. This simply cannot continue. Now, some of the questions, including what I've raised so far, we would like an inquest to answer, and hope that the investigation ongoing by the investigation or independent investigation unit will answer include the following. And these are 10 questions. We call them Glazer's top 10. Number 1, how many Winnipeg Police Service officers in uniform attended? 2, why were no crisis workers involved? 3, if police were needed, why not have plainclothes officers attend instead of officers in uniform? And how many officers did attend? Number 4, why was lethal force used instead of, for example, the use of a taser, so-called beanbag bullets, or pepper spray, or other means that would not result in death? Number 5, how many bullets were fired, and how many officers discharged their firearms? Number 6, how many bullets penetrated Bradley Singer's body? Number 7, how much time went by between the police arriving at the area of Bradley Singer's house and shooting him? 8, what training did these officers receive in terms of dealing with someone who is mentally ill? And what training or experience did they have in de-escalation techniques? 9, how much time went by between the time the police entered the house and shots were fired? Number 10, what if any de-escalation methods were used by the police who did it? Nobody deserves to die. And the ultimate question is, how do we prevent deaths like this happening in the future? So there are a lot of unanswered questions right now. We're not here to judge the police or to make a determination. But what we are here for is to call for an inquest. Hopefully get answers to a lot of the questions that my client and my colleagues' clients need to be answered. However long it takes, we intend to get to the bottom of what happened to these 2 mentally sick men, and to find out why it happened, how it happened, and whether or not these deaths could have been avoided by using alternative means. As I stated already, if it's not working, we as a society have to do better, and we have to fix the system so that vulnerable people who need help are treated with compassion and understanding and don't end up dead. Now, this is a photograph of Bradley Singer. He was shot by police to death on February 13, 2024, as stated. I have copies for all of you, and I'll distribute them now for you all. Singer was a member of the Jewish community, and only 59 years of age when the police caused his death. His brother, Jerry Singer, is here with me to make some brief remarks. And in closing, I would ask all of you to consider that what happened to his brother could happen to anyone's brother. The system needs to be reformed, and changes have to be made, and I sincerely hope that an inquest, which we have demanded, will provide at least some of the answers my client is seeking, and that my colleagues' clients are seeking. Thank you very much. And I'll call on Mr. Singer, Jerry Singer, to address you.
Thanks for coming. The tragic and necessary death of my brother Bradley has devastated my family. He was my 16-year-old biological son's favorite relative from an early age till his death. My son had no idea his uncle had a mental illness and cannot understand why he had to be shot multiple times. Bradley attended all of our family gatherings, had close relationships with most of our relatives, and will be sorely missed by all of our family. My 88-year-old mother recently celebrated her birthday and kept on asking, "Where is Bradley?" It must be difficult for her to accept that Bradley is gone forever. For myself, it just gets worse every day. Every day that passes, I feel sadder as the reality sinks in that my youngest brother and best friend is gone forever. I feel guiltier every day that I didn't do enough to possibly prevent his death. I'm also suffering some mental and physical problems since his death. Bear with me a moment here.
Take your time.
believe January 27th, the police apprehended my brother, and I had no idea this had happened. The following day, I attended my brother's residence to see how he was doing and possibly take him out for lunch. A neighbor approached me and told me the police had taken Brad away and there had been a huge police presence, and he showed me the damage that was done to our family's house by the apprehension. Not hearing from Brad, I became a bit worried and phoned the police and asked about my brother. They told me to protect my brother's privacy rights. They couldn't tell me anything. Finally, about 3 days later, a friend of Brad's phoned me and said Brad was at the hospital and couldn't remember my phone number because he didn't have his phone with him, but for me to come to see him, he needed smokes and money. I brought him smokes and he asked me for $500 so he could buy the ward pizza and chicken. I gave him $200 and told him just to buy pizza. The next event is very perplexing. Friday night I get a phone call from the hospital asking me if they know where my brother is. After the huge police presence and thousands of dollars of damage to our house, our family's house, to apprehend him, you don't know where he is, I asked him. Well, we let him go out on a smoke break and he never returned, and we thought you might know where he is. I have no idea, I told him. Should I check his residence, and if he is there, try talking him into returning to the hospital? I asked. He said, it's okay, then it's okay, Dennis replied. He can stay at home. Just have him call us so we know he is okay. I went to his residence and he was there, and he phoned the hospital and was allowed to stay at home. A week or so later, the IIU came to my residence and informed me my brother had been shot multiple times by the police, and they were going to hold an investigation. I asked him if my brother was still alive, and he replied, so far as he knew, he had come out of surgery alive and was at the HSC. I grabbed my other brother Hartley and rushed over to the HSC to find out his medical prognosis. We were told they weren't sure who had operated on him and to wait in a waiting room until they found out which doctor had operated on him. 2 hours later, a senior member of the IIU came in to see us and said, I'm very sorry for your loss. After that statement, my life has changed forever. I don't think I will ever get over my brother's needless death or recover from it. The police then took over our family's house for a few days by virtue of a warrant. We drove by to see what was going on and were denied entry by the police, but luckily we arrived just as the Humane Society arrived to take one of my brother's cats away, and we were able to rescue it from the Humane Society. We asked the officers who spoke to us and denied us entry if they were going to seal the house, the doors and windows of the house damaged in the apprehension. They said they were going to do so. The next day, the IIU phoned me early evening and said the police were giving us the house back. I arrived there to see that the windows and doors had not been sealed. The police officer said it was our responsibility and they would not be sealing the house. At 8 p.m. at night, they leave a 66-year-old man with $10 in his pocket to board up a house in one of the most dangerous areas of Winnipeg. I found an emergency board-up service on Google and had a friend rush down there to lend me the $300 the board-up service wanted. Another event worth mentioning was we asked the IIU to see Bradley's body, and they refused to allow this. In conclusion, our family owes $18,000 for Bradley's burial, and our house needs about $15,000 in repairs. And my brother's gone forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singer.
So in conclusion, before we open up for questions, if you guys have any, as from us here, NBS Legal Consulting, Martin Glazer Law Office, we will not let up because we are making clear connections. And it seems as though that a call for help, fortunately in Manitoba for people with mental health, seems to become a death sentence, and also the wall of silence. So that's why we need an inquest. We need transparency so these families can get not only the answers, but his family can also get the support that they need, because they're lacking in the support in terms of counseling, in terms of answers, just to navigate the system. Us here also, we wrote to the chief medical examiner on March 25th, and just like Mr. Glazer, we haven't had any courtesy of even acknowledging receipt of our message. So again, it's clear we're not against the police, we're not against them, but they're there to protect and to serve, and family members and concerns when that mandate is not being fulfilled. And I think also we owe it to our own police officers to properly equip them, to properly train them, so that they can be able to be answering this kind of calls. And so Mr. Glazer said, these Mr. Opaso, Mr. Singer were not criminals. Mr. Opaso, Mr. Singers, were simply Manitobans, Winnipeggers who needed help, needed assistance, and unfortunately ended up in a death. So, subject to any questions you guys might have, we can answer. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you keep saying you're requesting an inquest, but I just spoke to the medical examiner officer, and she said that it would be mandatory under the Fatality Inquiries Act. But I guess what's different is you guys are asking for a joint inquest. Like, how unusual is that? Why do it as a joint inquest?
Actually, if I can answer that, under the Fatality Inquiries Act, section 19.12, it says the chief medical examiner may direct the chief judge to arrange for a single inquest to be held into 2 or more deaths if the facts or circumstances relating to those deaths are the same or are sufficiently similar that separate inquests are not required. And you're right, it is mandatory. In my letter to chief medical examiner, I pointed out that it is mandatory. But we want to know when it's going to be held. We want confirmation it's going to be held, and we haven't received a reply so far. In my letter, I did quote the section of the Fatalities Act that says it's mandatory. In fact, in our press release, it says it's mandatory. So
I guess why you keep saying you're demanding it's because it's a joint one and that's unusual, or
no,
why do it joint?
We're demanding for the reasons I gave, because there's similar circumstances, right? Similar cases. 2 men, mentally ill, killed 6 weeks apart by the same Winnipeg Police Force, and all the other similarities that I pointed out earlier. So that's why we want a joint inquest. And we want it sooner rather than later. Sometimes you don't get an inquest for years. One of the things they have to do is wait for the IIU to complete their investigation and see whether criminal charges are recommended or not. And we're aware of that. But we like to get the ball rolling. Another thing I asked the chief medical examiner to provide, it's a copy of my correspondence, is on behalf of the next of kin, Jerry Singer, I'm requesting to provide my office with a copy of the medical examiner's report and the autopsy report as soon as possible. By law, we're entitled to both of those. So far, nothing. And you would think by now they would at least have the medical examiner's report. The autopsy was done. Where's the autopsy report? So we're not getting answers. We're not getting anything. And as we said earlier, our clients are met with a wall of silence. That's not the way it should be. We're entitled to answers. I know government is slow. We all know that. But still, we want to get this moving. We want to get to the bottom of it. And we don't want anything to be stalled. So when we say demand, we want it now. We want it yesterday. We don't want it 5 years from now.
And also, just to finish the line, is like, because we're making that connection in terms of also, not only for them, but our police force equipped to be answering these type of calls. So that's why the joint will also expand the scope, just to see that it's not just these individuals, but the similarities, are they equipped as a police force to even be in the forefront answering these kind of calls. That's why I think a joint one, and similarities will help to shed light also in terms of the practices in place.
In fact, you and your partner mentioned the need for support and for the family and throughout the inquest even. Like, what kind of support and assistance are you asking?
Well, for example, like we said in terms of counseling, because going through deaths of loved ones, in terms of counseling, because I know with victim services, Mr. Bliss can correct me, is counseling is offered, is covered. So this type of stuff, right? In terms of information, so that they're not kept in the dark. The issue with families, like, they don't know. And when you don't know, you start, speculating, you start going and stuff. And also in terms of if it is proven that it was as a result of the misconduct of the police, if it is proven, we believe in terms of, the extra cost that the family have to bear, the burials, the repairs. Sometimes when they come, I'm pretty sure, the singer's family home is probably damaged. Well, it needs to be fixed, so we don't need to resort to litigation or, sue the police force or sue the government so that they can get some type of money to fix that. Those are the type of support that I think the family.
Well, and then also legal fees, because police get public representation. Who's gonna pay to represent both these families?
You see? So at this time, Mr. Glazer, I can speak to
Who is
Mr.
it?
Glazer about.
Are they paying for it, or?
We're doing it pro bono.
Well, you see?
Both firms.
Just to pick up on your question, if I may, Ms. Brass, the government has spent a lot of money on victims of crime. There's victims of crime compensation legislation. There's Canada's House, a whole place where victims of crime can go when they're going to court. They get help from victim services. People help them navigate the system. My client, Mr. Singer, hasn't gotten any help, nothing to navigate. He has to get a lawyer to help him get answers. It should be that way. So, to answer your question, we're asking that these victims, Mr. Singer, Mr. Opaso's family, get the same help that victims of crime get. Because whether it's the police violence in this case was criminal or not, it's still police violence. The families of the people who end up dead are victims, but they're not being treated like victims. They're sort of, as I said earlier, ignored. So that's what we're looking for.
Is there a hope that the media attention will get the ball rolling a little quicker, get some emails answered?
We're hoping that, obviously, yes, and that's one of the reasons for this press conference. People like you are really the safeguard against things that go wrong, and you can shine a light in terms of inadequacies in the system. So the fifth estate is very important in addressing these things, and that's why we're sort of coming to you. And that's why we play the video, so you can see for yourselves. If you want, we can play it again. Why are heavily armed police officers, I don't know how many there were there, I think my colleague counted
About 7.
7 or 8. There were, I think, 3 or 4 police vehicles. Why are they descending on a man who's mentally sick, is taken to see a doctor? Isn't 1 or 2 officers enough?
A drone?
And a drone.
Break into the window.
You saw them break the window. They have a loudspeaker. I mean, they're treating him like he's a terrorist, in my respectful view. And so, I'm sorry you couldn't play it on the big screen today. We just couldn't connect it. But hopefully you saw it. And I think that alone speaks volumes, because as I understand it, the police say, well, we go there, we're trying to help these people, we respond to these calls, and we're using kids' gloves. Does that look like kids' gloves? We've got like an army of police officers descending on this man, and they look like soldiers.
Can you share that video with us?
You could all film it while we play it, sure. That's what it's here for.
In terms of mental health distress calls, what are you looking for in terms of the response to them? Are you looking for police not to respond to them at all? Are you looking for I know there's art, but the police still determine whether or not art needs to be dispatched or not. So what specific changes are you looking for in terms of responding to mental health calls?
I think Jean-Rene can answer that, because, go ahead.
Yeah, but the issue, just like we said, many experts are aware that the presence of the police itself is also a trigger for, people going under mental health. I know they keep saying, like you said, in plain cloud they come there, but unfortunately in many instances that we are becoming aware of, that is not happening. And we think that it's not for the police to determine if it's appropriate for art to be deployed. For us, we think it's just common sense. And many of these health workers we've spoken to, our experts, they know the risk, they know how to de-escalate, they know how to properly assess a situation if it becomes out of control where they need the police. They can always avail themselves of that option. But the question is, we don't want that to be the first option, where someone can be civilian led, right? They can come, they can assess the situation because they are properly trained, they're properly equipped, and it's after the escalation is not working, it's after that is not working, and sometimes it might be a situation where it's really even dangerous for them. Then we can get the assistance of our police officers who are equipped then in that type of situation to handle that. When someone's going into a mental health breakdown or something like that, right? And obviously sometimes when they're not even a threat to others, they're a threat to themselves, right? We don't think that force is necessary, is needed.
Just to echo on my colleague's comments, we hear about suicide by cop. You're not gonna have a suicide by cop if police don't respond. And when someone calls, there should be a number that's redirected to mental health crisis workers who are trained to deal with people who need help. Why do the police call the shots? Why do the police decide whether to bring in those people or not? So, as my colleague indicated, they're trained. Mental health workers are trained to deal with mentally ill patients. They have the training that the police don't have. So, if, let's say I 911 a call to this place saying my brother is having a nervous breakdown. Does he have a weapon? No. Is he dangerous? No. Is he violent? No. Why are the police responding? Why don't have mental health crisis workers respond?
But
And
didn't
if
they
things-
both have weapons?
What's that?
They had weapons,
Who had weapons?
the two victims.
Allegedly.
That's the allegation, but when faced with police with guns, I don't know if either of them had guns. I don't think so. And Opaso, I think the audio shows 9 seconds. Police say drop the knife. Boom, boom, boom. Where's the attempt to calm or reassure the person? And police are trained to shoot to kill in the torso. Not in the shoulder, not in the leg, but in the torso. You're gonna get a fatality. So, ultimately, we're saying that other cities, Toronto does it better than we do, as you've read. Why are we lacking? Why aren't we doing things better? And as my colleague indicated, these people are trained, just like we're lawyers. I go to the jail every day to see clients. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. Should I not go see my clients? Should the police go first, make sure it's safe? We know what to do. We know how to deal with our clients. Same here. Mental health workers know how to deal with their clients. It's not up to police. The other thing is, what I've heard is these mental health workers only work 9 to 5. A lot of these crises happen at midnight or middle of the night. The mental health workers are not working. That doesn't make sense at all. So you should have 24-hour availability of mental health crisis workers, in my opinion. Hope that answers your question.
And you're also asking for, you said, footage of unnecessarily these interactions. So does that mean body cameras?
Body cameras or simply holding up a cell phone, as people are doing here today. Why can't an officer or someone there film it on their cell phone? Why don't the police have body cameras? We know other cities have body cameras. We keep hearing excuses why body cameras aren't being used. But yes, body cameras or anyone filming it on their cell phone. So we have a complete electronic record. There's a saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words, a video's worth 1,000 pictures.
And to give credit to the police, and as many of you know, we had a town hall with Chief Smythe, and he clearly said that as a chief, and many people are in support of that, and apparently a proposal was brought to the city, to our city councilors, and they shut it down. So like just Mr. Chris said, so it's easy also to place the blame to the police. The police also, perhaps for themselves also, they might be justified, right? So that the public is transparency. They might be maybe, but Chief Smythe said that they were on board, but now the city is saying it's issue of funding, it's issue. We find a way to fund things when we think it's a priority.
Calgary police have it,
Yeah.
other police forces have it. We can do it. There doesn't seem to be the will, or if there is the will, on some part of some people, others give excuses and delay it, that we don't have body cameras. But nowadays with cell phones, it's not hard to film everything. So if the police did nothing wrong, we have an electronic objective record to support them. And if they did do something wrong, the camera doesn't lie, we can see what went wrong.
So Mayor Gilman, the city councilor, if our police officers are on board with it, they want it also as a device to help them. So we felt to see where the excuse is from City Hall, because in all these instances also it's easier to just lay the blame at the police, because they're also put in a situation where they have to respond, but there are some people also above them who make decisions. That's we have the premier, we have all ministers, we have the mayor, we have the people. They have means, they have capability of changing things, amending legislation. So this is not just to put the blame on the police services executing what is mandated by different laws. So we're also asking is the will is there, the mean is there. So I think for Manitobans, because the fear that we're hearing mostly is for family members of people dealing with mental health. We don't want to have an experience where in Winnipeg family members don't want to call for help because they're fearful that it might be a death sentence to their family members. And I think that would be a sad state of affair for us as a city, as a province, if that is unfortunately, the sentiment and the message out there.
So there's no downside to having body cameras. I can't think of any downside. It protects the police. It protects people who meet with the police. It protects everyone. This way you have transparency. Otherwise, you'd have a police narrative. They're not there, but the police are there. There's no one else there but them. So how do you know that their narrative is the correct one? They have a vested interest in giving you a certain narrative. And none of you, I take it, have seen the police officer's notes so far. None of you have had the police consent to an interview, the officers who were at Mr. Opaso's residence or Mr. Singh's residence. Everything's quiet. And I've been a criminal defense lawyer for 41 years. I do a lot of murder cases. Why is it when murder cases are solved, the person's arrested right away? Why is it here it takes so long to investigate? Why in many of these cases the investigation, what's called independent investigative unit, takes at least a year before you hear anything? Why does it take so long?
Can we ask Mr. Singer? Can we ask him something?
Sure.
We'll just move the microphones over first.
I know guys in that answer the second question.
How is this ordeal, thing for your family? What are you guys going through?
It's just beyond belief. In some ways, it's hard to believe that it actually happened. And we don't really realize that till he's not there. It's just so unnecessary for this to happen. And I can't imagine how my brother felt dying like that. I mean, it's got to be horrific. They mentioned 3 bullets. What's left in our house, I think, is upwards of 10 bullets. And some of the bullets were face high in the wall. I don't know what that means. Does it mean he was shot at an angle and went through him? Or was he shot in the face? They wouldn't let us see his body. So, like Mr. Glazer said, if we had, body cams, we'd know who was really responsible. I think my brother has to take responsibility. He had very simple conditions. He just had to telephone his doctors 3 times a month and have one in-person meeting. But still, it doesn't mean he has to die for that. It's like one of us missing a doctor's appointment, even though it's mandatory, I guess.
How was he doing just before this happened?
Well, he was kind of enigmatic. He became ill in his early 20s. He had both me and him together. We established some fairly large businesses during the first 20 years of his life, and or from the age 20 to 40, for him. And yet he'd have these delusions about religious beliefs, and this review board and the doctors that cured Vince Lee in 5 years, well, at 21 years, I don't think they even attempted or thought it was possible to cure people like my brother. They just warehouse them and keep them drowsy with medication. And it's just a horrible loss. And probably about 100 of his friends have reached out to me since his death, and it's the same common denominator. They all agree, Brad was a non-violent person. He's one of the nicest people you could ever know. And I just can't understand how this could happen in our great city, province, and country. We judge. You're judged by how you take care of the most vulnerable, the most needy, and this is what it's come to. Where there's just systematic failures in our systems. And,
How much do you miss him?
well, he's the only one that has, half of my references. Like, I can't talk to my other brother about, the trip I made to Toronto with Bradley and who we met and who we talked to. It's just gone forever. And I just, try coping with it the best I can. And that's about it, I hope I can understand how your client's family feels. It's just something you can't possibly deal with. It's, yeah, that's all I have to say about that, I guess.
question?
Yeah, if I may say something concerning the family of
You just
Opaso.
continue to wait till we do the lights.
Yes, I would like to say something in answer the question you asked Mr. Singer concerning the family of Opaso. Family of Opaso is from Nigeria, and in their culture, parents cannot bury their children. So the mother couldn't see the body of her dead son, and she had a kind of heart attack.
There's some blood pressure.
So high blood pressure. The sister lives in the USA, in Texas. So he was here. He was killed here, alone, no family, no assistance, and they had to struggle to borrow money to have the elder sister fly here in Canada, book a hotel. So all of that cost like the $18,000 burial cost. All of that by themselves. You had to fight to have a visa for that sister. I believe the visa was denied to.
Who was granted?
It was granted. Okay.
MP Terry Dugan.
So we needed an intervention of an MP for them to have that visa to come bury their son who was killed in Canada. So if the visa had not been granted, then they couldn't even have the right to come here. But thank God the visa was granted and the sister traveled to come here. So the mother didn't see the body, the father didn't see the body, and it's very painful. Very painful for the family. And he was buried here. So no member of the family is in Winnipeg. So they will never see their brother, their son forever. No place to mourn. So this is what the family is going through, and I don't think any one of us here would wish that for anybody, to your worst enemy. Okay, so this is very difficult. No support. They wished at least the government could extend, some sort of check to help them bury their brother who was killed by the police, but nothing. So at the end of the day, like Mr. Glazer said, he did that Pro-Bono. We had to do that so far Pro-Bono, and all these hours, but nobody is taking, no attention. So this is one of the things also we would like the government to put into consideration. Victims of crime have some help, but not victims of the police. So this is something we must think about and to improve. Like Mr. Glazer said, oh no, you said that. If now we are scared to call the police when we have a son, a brother who has mental illness, this is very sad. I know many parents who say they will not call the police even if there is, a fight at home, because it might end up worse. So is that what we want for our society? That we have trouble in our homes, mental illness, schizophrenia, and we will not call for help? So these are the questions, we would like our own society to think about. This is very serious. Society that cannot help the most vulnerable people is not a great society. We need to improve. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say about the Opaso family.
I think that wraps up. Thank you very much, guys, for being here. And Mr. Glazer, we appreciate you guys is also keeping these stories alive, making sure that we hold the institutions, the government, and the services accountable. And yeah. So I don't know, you guys want
You
me to
want us to play
play
a video again?
Are you able to share it through,
Yeah.
like send it to us? It'd be better quality for us.
Yes, that's fine. I think the public's entitled to move.
Okay, that's fine.
And that was shot by Bradley.
No, that
No,
video
we
was
don't-
shot
At
by.
this stage, we have a source, which we don't.
Oh, okay.
reveal,
A neighbor.
For certain,
Yeah.
for some reasons.
That's,
The police have their sources, we have ours.
Okay.
At this stage, it's confidential source.
Okay.
But we will, I have it on USB.
It's not
USB source.
Yeah, no, I do.
And, if you want to download, if you have computers, I can also, email it
Yeah, if you can email it.
to you. Mr. Singer has given me permission? Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do that right away. You have a list of all the outlets, email addresses?
Yeah, I think most of. Okay. Yeah, I think
Give us
most
all
of
your
that.
cards maybe, and we can email it to everyone. Is it there?
Yeah. Une, c'est, vous avez votre caméra ici, on peut la prendre en français si vous voulez. On va installer à l'extérieur. Ok, pas de souci, merci. Perfect, and I'll share it.
Okay, yeah.
That's it.
No card.
I just wanna make sure I have it. I'm gonna forward it to everyone, or,
Yeah.
What's that?
If you have the picture.
And the picture as well?
Yeah.
No, they want the picture.
It's just better quality,
quality.
yeah.
yeah, okay. So, please see Pro-Bono.
And Jean-Rene? I also sent my email to you.
Okay, I can.
Okay, we'll fill it all in and send it to all of you simultaneously.
Yeah, so we'll fill it in and then we'll just send it.
Yeah, just send it to everyone.
Yeah, thank you guys very much.
Thank you for coming, everyone.
Hopefully, Dr. Eunice responds to our letter.
Told them I'd be happy to speak to my friend. Yeah, this we're gonna go over, right?
They stopped doing the text, so now I just